welcome back to the Superfreak Podcast. A few years ago, I remember a friend asking me what my New Year's resolution was. I'm not really much of a New Year's resolution kind of a gal, but I immediately said to her, no deadlines. I'm done with deadlines, no more. And I just want to get things done in their own natural timing. And she kind of laughed. And at the time, it really did seem quite outrageous as an idea because I was snowed under by my own deadlines. But I was officially done with trying to keep up with these standards and these rules that I had made up, by the way, for myself, about how long things were supposed to take and what would make me consistent and how frequently things needed to happen in order for business to be quote unquote successful. Now that was a few years ago, but during the past few weeks and months, it's become really clear that I need to talk more about these slow living principles that underpin my high performance coaching to make it holistic and sustainable, because the conversation is coming up everywhere in my private practice. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it, that slow living underpins high performance? And that's because it is. It's unorthodox. But let me tell you, it's my firm belief that this is what we need. I work with a lot of really super driven women and men at different stages and phases of their careers and their lives, and with very different businesses and goals. But the one thing that has always remained consistent is that the moment that they reach out to work with me is the moment that they realize they can't keep going the way that they are, but they feel stuck because they're not willing to stop. And the reason they're not willing to stop is because they're nowhere near done yet. They have these big visions, these big goals, but the gap between where they are and where they want to be has no previously constructed bridge. It's not clear how to get from A to B. Now, the underlying problem is this belief that if we stop doing things the way that we currently are doing them, or how they've always been done, it means we're giving up on the end result. And it's not true, but it definitely feels true. It feels dangerous to kind of slow down the pace and explore. So when people reach out, they're always really driven, yet they're at this point where they're either like bored, or they're unclear, or they're exhausted, or all three. They're ambitious, but they can't find a way to break through their own glass ceiling. They love to work, or they love what they do, or they love the benefits of their work and what they do, but it just doesn't even touch the sides in terms of where they see themselves and where they want to go. Yet again, that gap is big and between where they are and where they want to be, and their physical capacity for where to go from here is not available to them. Or like I said, they're bored and they're not even sure if this is what they want, because it seems like the whole process is just a means to an end and it doesn't feel good anymore. Now, for those who aren't burnt out, the idea of slowing down sounds nice, but also deathly boring. And their unwillingness to slow down means that they're missing these crucial moments of being able to spot opportunities to do things differently and to get exponentially better results. And for those who are burnt out, slowing down is terrifying because they think, if I slow down, this whole thing's going to break, but I need to so badly, but I can't. And so this cycle continues. And for those who are bored or unclear about what they want, well, things already feel like they're going a little bit too slowly. So slowing down once again just sounds awful because it sounds like the opposite of like hurrying up and not being bored anymore, you know. Now, it doesn't sound like it, but actually the same method of thinking applies to solve all of these problems, burned out or bored or unclear, in order to go from where you want to where you want to go in a way that is not only fun, but it's energizing and it's a game changer for your whole life holistically. Because when you start applying a slower philosophy to any area of your life and business, it naturally impacts everything else. It calls everything else into question. Because in order to slow down in one area, it's going to naturally overflow and impact all the other areas of your life. So this is not something that can actually be done quickly. It has to be done slowly. Now, I believe that when you're at this point though, where you're looking to go from where you are to where you want to be, there's a big gap between where it is. It looks impossible or difficult. Logical answers are outdated. You know, try harder, be more organized, take a holiday, try a new hobby. You've tried them all anyway. And you often start thinking quite deeply about all the ways we're taught to run a business and create success. And you realize so much of it is really quite extractive of you as a human. We're constantly hustling, showing up, being visible. And if you're using social media, well, we're feeding a machine that is just never satisfied, ever changing, ever growing, and ultimately depleting our capacity as humans to regulate ourselves, to truly connect, to finish a thought the entire way through, and to be able to properly relax and switch off. It's complex, it's nuanced, yes, and the solution is certainly not for everyone right now, but I believe that if you're here, it might be for you too. Now, I never had a language to name this way of operating, like slow living in business, because the premise with slow living is that it means your revenue is going to be slow, your business doesn't work, and it's more of a slow down to speed up kind of way of thinking. That's how I think about it. And in fact, this is part of where the name Superfreak for this podcast actually came from, because it seems to defy logic. When I think of a superfreak, I think of someone who cuts through the noise to straight line a result. Someone who works hard and smart for the love of the journey and the process and the creativity, not just as a means to an end or for the result at the end, though the result at the end can be really fruitful. I think of someone who has a capacity to be able to slow down, because in order to slow down, you need to be able to hold the tension that creates due to the pressure that the world seems to place upon us not to slow down. Someone who goes slow in order to go fast. And that is a very powerful idea, but it's not something that is often spoken about. It's not something that has been widely researched. It has been researched a lot, but it's not super mainstream. Enter the slow living movement, a counterintuitive description for business, yes, yet a perfect one. Slow living is part of a wider movement of slow everything, basically. This movement was originally spearheaded in Italy by a journalist, Carlo Petrini, I think his name is, in the 80s, and a group of activists who were dead against a McDonald's opening in Rome. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed. And they started the slow food movement, focusing on encouraging people away from fast food to food that was natural and locally grown, and protecting gastronomic traditions and promoting sustainability and fair pay for producers, and encouraging just the enjoyment of the meal itself in a slow fashion, savoring the flavors. This movement spread around the world and then naturally sparked a much wider philosophy on living slowly in just about every other way, from parenting to business to travel. And as the movement was then brought to the mainstream, a man by the name of Carl Honore wrote a book. He's an author and a speaker around the slow movement. He published a book in 2004 called In Praise of Slow, How a Worldwide Movement is Challenging the Cult of Speed. And this brought the slow living movement even more to the mainstream. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about living slowly. The main one being it's, boring and it means you're not going to get results. But I think Honore counters most of them really well in his book when he says this: speed can be fun, productive, and powerful, and we would be poorer without it. What the world needs and what the slow movement offers is a middle path, a recipe for marrying la dolce vita with the dynamism of the information age. The secret is balance. Instead of doing everything faster, do everything at the right speed. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes in between. This, right? There are so many philosophies and distinctions to live by that underpin the slow living movement. And if you've been here for a while, you know that I love a good philosophy. And what I'd like to do today is, just off the back of this quote by Honore, is introduce you to just one of the philosophies of slow living, the one that I both love the most and am challenged by the most, actually, but the one that I apply to business and that has made the biggest difference to my business. And we can call this a slow living business principle, and that is the principle of natural timing. In this episode, I'm going to share with you 7 ways you can implement natural timing into a business. Oh, it feels so good just even to say that. And I'm also going to give you 7 specific examples of how I do it in mine that lead to more profits and actually more productivity, not less. Now, if you Google the word slow business, you will not find this information at the top of Google, because the instant assumption is it means your business is not doing so well and something needs to be fixed in order to speed it up. You'll find a lot of articles about what to do when a business is slow. But the concept of slow business, slow work, slow entrepreneurship has been around for a really long time. And let me tell you, there's a lot of research. And I really do believe that the fastest way to leap from good to great is to get on board with living slower or at the right speed for you, so you can spot the opportunities to make really transformational changes and doing things at your own natural pace. So let's talk about natural timing. What on earth does that even mean? So natural timing is the practice of aligning your actions, your decisions, and your processes with the inherent rhythms and cycles found in nature, in your personal energy levels, and in the natural flow of events. It emphasizes presence and intuition and responsiveness to the organic pace of life rather than forcing outcomes according to these artificial made-up deadlines or external pressures. So in essence, natural timing is about trusting that things will unfold in their own time, allowing for more harmonious, sustainable, and authentic results. Doesn't that just sound delicious? I know that I wouldn't even be in business today, 16 years after beginning, if I had tried to keep up with all the ways that I was initially taught to run my business, which was not slow. And if I hadn't implemented natural timing, because 8 years ago, I nearly quit. I was doing all right. I was making good money. I had more than replaced my corporate income. My business revenue was increasing, but I was really feeling like I was reaching the end of my tether in terms of how much harder I could keep working if I wanted to even sustain what I was doing, let alone increase my profits or have any proper time off to think or rest. I was working at an unsustainable pace in order to achieve results, and I was starting to question why. I had a mentor at the time who really understood me, like that I was a really ambitious human being, and he always used to mess with my thinking and say, "You're really great at creating success and exhaustion." And I could never work out how I could let go of the exhaustion bit. And he used to challenge me all the time and stretch my thinking as to how I could create more with less time and energy. And it was very helpful for me coming off the back of chronic illness to start playing with, like, just thinking outside of the realms of how business is typically taught, just messing with my thinking. And this was the beginning for me, of stepping outside of the normal parameters of how I'd been taught to think about making money and time and business, which was all really linear. But the more I got into it, the more I realized business was never linear, and it never really will be. When you take a straight business plan and you map it into a real human being's life with a real economy and a real body and an environment and a location and people and everything, it's no longer a linear thing. It's a cyclical, it's alive, it's organic, it's messy. It's a moment-to-moment thing. It never made sense to me that I could at the same time be so driven and so energetic and feel so creative and yet be so allergic to so many of the modern business and marketing and selling practices that I was taught. And I really felt like I just couldn't keep up, because it seemed like every time I tried to replicate or model something that I was taught by someone really successful about how to create the same or similar results, it left me feeling exhausted, or like I had to manage this side effect of constant low-key anxiety because you could never just be off. So the results were really good, but the side effects were like not. And I also found that so many of these techniques I was taught just required so much on time, so much screen time, so much constant feeding that machine, and so much what felt like yelling and extraction and getting, like doing something for the purpose of getting something, and this overt like strategy. I just didn't like it. I dabbled and I tried things, of course, because I do believe in pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and not just kind of making an assessment or judging from the outside before giving it a go. But I can confirm that sometimes you just end up realizing, I'm not resistant to this because it's outside my comfort zone. I just need to double down and be better organized or something. I'm resistant to this because it's not aligned with my values or even my physical capacity and capability in my body. And that's certainly how I felt. Now, I'm not ungrateful for the things that I've learned over the years, and I know that they do work for so many. But the one lesson that became abundantly clear for me is that just because everyone's doing it, it doesn't mean it's the only way. And also, more importantly, it doesn't mean it even works. And this has probably been the most liberating part of learning natural timing, because the idea is that you pace yourself properly, which is your own natural pace, which is naturally going to be slower than the pace that the world operates at. Now, at first glance, it would seem like that's not a good idea, like you're going to fall behind. But long term, sustainability and regeneration wins the race. Long term, it's those who operate at their natural pace and stay true to their values and have the time and space to think and assess and review and learn and rest, who become the cream that rise to the top during hard economic times, changes in legislation, and different fluctuating personal seasons and stages of life and market trends and market changes and tech changes. It's not as glamorous day to day, but it is pretty spectacular to still be around long after you started. And I don't know about you, but I didn't start my business so I could rush everything every day, though that is sadly how I spent a significant portion of my career, and I have to actively disengage from doing, and I don't want you to. So that's the purpose of this episode today. So take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and I'm going to share 7 ways that you can implement natural timing in your business, 7 examples of how I do it in mine, and I'd love to hear from you what you think. Now, if you're not in business, I encourage you to stick around for this episode, because it is through listening to left field examples of how people make these concepts work in their own obscure little worlds that will spark your own ideas for how you can implement things like this in your workplace or in the corners of your life, in work or outside of work. So here are 7 ways you can implement natural timing in any business. And I'm going to give you examples afterwards of my own business. The first slow living natural timing principle is respect for the natural cycles. So just as nature has seasons, businesses experience cycles of growth and rest and renewal as well. And embracing these cycles means recognizing when to push for growth and when to allow for reflection and rest and recovery. So for example, after a major launch or a major project, a period of perhaps rest or evaluation can lead to more sustainable long-term success, because this period of time can be as long as or short as what feels right for you. It doesn't have to be, a season. The length of time doesn't matter, but the action of using it to rest and reflect is what matters. When you do this, you give yourself the time and space to assimilate lessons and assimilate data so that when you look ahead to the next launch or the next round or the next project, you can take those lessons with you and you're not going to make the same mistakes over and over again. So this respect for natural cycles means that when you're in an on season, you are really, really doing quality work and you're not repeating mistakes over and over and over again. The second one is mindful decision making. Natural timing encourages taking the necessary time to make thoughtful, well-considered decisions. So instead of rushing to capitalize on trends or opportunities, it's about waiting for the right moment when all the factors align for you, leading to decisions that are more authentic and aligned with your values. You can use data to experiment with this. For example, how many people have we seen jump on tech trends like making more and more reels on Instagram, adding more workload to their days, without checking to see if their efforts really pay off on the goals that matter? Like, do they actually lead to more sales that correlate with the amount of time and energy and even money that goes into creating this quality content? At the time of recording, this new thing on Instagram called Threads is quite new. I don't know where it's going. I haven't jumped on the trend, but I can't help but wonder how many people have jumped on it and they're having conversations with people, but they're not really leading anywhere. It's just taking time away from their work. I don't know. But my point is, mindful decision making is about taking a step back and asking, what are the factors that would make this a yes for me? And does this new idea or does this trend or does this opportunity meet all of those factors? So you might come across a really great opportunity in your business Perhaps it's a publicity opportunity and it seems like a fantastic idea, but by taking a moment to mindfully reflect and make the decision, you can really check in with if this opportunity aligns with your values, if the amount of work and time and energy and money that you'd have to put in to do it is going to really have the impact and get you closer to your ultimate goals, or if it's just going to be kind of like a vanity project where you can say that you were featured in this particular magazine or whatever it might be, but it's not really going to make an impact to your business. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but taking the time to really think about that and then making a decision is what natural timing is all about. And you will find that you end up making decisions that surprise you. Number 3 is pacing workloads. In a fast-paced business environment, there's this tendency to overextend ourselves. Natural timing advocates for a pace that matches your energy levels, which are perfect, by the way, no matter what your energy levels are, and a pace that matches your capacities, ensuring that work is done with care and with this word that I love called quality. This approach can prevent burnout, and it can also increase overall productivity, which sounds counterintuitive, but it aligns the work intensity with your natural cycle. So for example, you might work to your circadian rhythm rather than trying to keep up with the traditional 9-to-5 work schedule. If you're an early bird, you make the bulk of your workday earlier. If you're a night owl, same deal. Or if you're a woman with a cycle, you know that we have like 4 different ratios of hormones fluctuating through our bodies, like during 4 separate seasons of our cycle. And you might like to plan your launches or your big creative days according to when it is easiest for you to think straight and to be creative. Number 4 is sustainable growth. So don't come at me, but rather than striving for like rapid expansion, natural time, by the way, rapid expansion is not as good as it sounds. There is a lot of problems that can occur with growing too quickly. Natural timing supports gradual, sustainable growth, and this allows businesses to scale if they want to, in a way that is in harmony with the resources available, both human and financial, like your natural energy, your physical capacity, the money that you have. It promotes long-term sustainability over short-term quick gains that take away from us temporarily that we then have to build back from. Now, I don't want you to hear this and think it means I need to slow down my income. Not at all. What it means is every time you reach a new income level, it's stable. It's not a fluke. It's not something that you reach and then you have to scale back because it's too much. It becomes a really enjoyable process of growth because it feels stable, which is so nice. Number 5 is client, business, and market alignment. Now, natural timing also applies to how you interact with clients and your marketplace. So instead of pushing products or services prematurely or in an unnatural timing, it's just about understanding when your audience is most receptive. So this could mean that you're launching a product when there's more genuine demand or when your audience is ready, rather than adhering to kind of arbitrary timelines, keeping in mind, of course, that you will have a natural readiness within yourself as well. So an example might be if you have a well-being offering. There are certain times of the year when you know your audience is going to be more receptive to this type of thing, like maybe at the end of winter or in the new year, rather than just when you have a slot open in your schedule. You might work with parents, and keeping in mind that if you do work with parents, there are times when parents are on holidays and there are times when the kids are at school, and you might like to pace what you do around that in particular. But alongside this, when you give your clients and the market time to actually get to know what it is that you're sharing and what you're doing, and you build up to it, you're creating a natural timing and you're creating a genuine demand or a genuine awareness about something, rather than just kind of throwing it out there. There's nothing wrong with just throwing it out there, by the way. I've done that so many times myself. But this is about, like trusting in that kind of timing, your timing and the market's timing. Number 6 is embracing presence and trust. Now, presence, I don't like the word patience, but you can also use this here. But presence is a key aspect of natural timing. It involves trusting that opportunities will arise at the right moment and resisting the urge to rush progress. Have you ever heard the Lao Tzu quote, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished"? It's one of my favorite quotes. And This is about trusting that you're always in right timing. Things are unfolding exactly as they should. You are not behind or wrong, no matter what is happening. This approach can lead to so many more meaningful and impactful outcomes, and it allows ideas and projects to mature fully before being brought to market. Now, this is so counterintuitive to the advice, start before you're ready. And I actually still agree with that advice to some extent. If you find that you're overthinking it or you're getting caught in perfectionism as a way to kind of let yourself off the hook and begin. But how often have you read something or done something yourself and thought, if I just gave myself a little bit more time, this would have been such a better quality? That's what we're talking about. Embracing that presence and embracing that trust actually improves the quality of things, and everything is better for that. The final one, number 7, is work-life balance. Now, by following natural timing, businesses can promote a healthier work-life balance. It respects the need for personal time and ensures that work does not encroach on periods that should be dedicated to rest or family or to personal well-being. This balance is essential for maintaining long-term productivity and creativity. Like if you still want to be around, you got to take time off. Balance doesn't always look like a set schedule. There's no perfect way to do balance. In fact, sometimes balance looks like more work than family or more rest than work. But natural timing encourages us to give space to all the parts of ourselves and once again trust that the best work comes from allowing for rest as well as work, just like athletes do. Okay, so that was 7 examples of how you can apply natural timing to your business or to any business. And to make this real, I want to give you 7 real world natural timing examples of how I apply it in my own business. And hopefully this will inspire you to come up with some creative ways that you can apply a slower philosophy to your own creative endeavors too. So the first example is loosening hard deadlines on creative projects. Letting things just take as long as they take and enjoying the creative process. Now, I can already hear this one rustling a few feathers, especially if you think, that's going to take too long. So bear with me. Have you ever heard of Parkinson's law before when it comes to time? Parkinson's law states that work always expands to fill the amount of time that you've allowed for it. The premise is that if you allow an hour to do a task, it'll take an hour, and if you allow 2, it'll take 2. And at first, I found this law really helpful when I was learning about productivity and managing my time. I started allotting, say, like a time that a task would get done within and getting to work. But over time, I have to be really honest, most of what I learned about productivity, even though it's really helpful and effective, it leaves me feeling quite anxious when I apply it in real world timing. And I couldn't work out why. But I also noticed that this law is only really helpful if I already have a rough idea of how long something will typically take already. Otherwise, I'm just guessing. And 1,000% of the time, I guess it so wrong. So if I make all these plans with like milestones and deadlines and I try to map it out and I get them wrong and then the whole timeline gets thrown out, it just feels like unnecessarily cluttered. And then we have to go move all the timelines. It's just not how my brain works. If something is creative and I've made up when I should finish it by, I tend to just feel really rushed and squished, and I don't like it. And I don't know why I have to do that if this is my business. So I'm no longer a fan of applying Parkinson's law to my creative endeavors anymore, even though I know it's true, because it is helpful. It just feels unnecessary for some things. And also there's this law called Hofstede's law. When I learned about this one, I realized why Parkinson's law was making me feel really stressful. Hofstede's law says that it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstede's law. This is about understanding that our estimates are always out. This is a true thing about human beings. We cannot plan time properly. These 2 laws are kind of in opposition to one another. One says it just takes as long as you decide, and the other says no matter what you say, it's going to take longer. Now, the way I've always gotten around this and still been able to kind of do things on some form of timeline when it comes to productivity is if I do need to plan something, I allow 3 times as long as I think I'm going to need, and I might be somewhere in the ballpark, but I do find that Hofstede's law still applies. So this is not to say that deadlines are bad, like don't use them, but loosening them is such a nice way to apply the principles of slower, joyful productivity. And I find that when I don't feel so rushed and when I know I actually have time to do things I do, I tend to get them done a little bit faster, and it's definitely more enjoyable. Like, why create anxiety and stress every day in my own work that nobody's watching me do? Seems ridiculous, but it's what I was doing. Now, what it essentially came down to for me was exploring which deadlines are the necessary ones and which ones are the ones we make up and then stress about. And happy to report, most of them were the made up kind. And most of the made up deadlines I was trying to abide by were slowly just wearing me down and burning me out, like needing to post every day or even every week. Make a podcast every single week. Where did that come from? It certainly does challenge the status quo. And this has required me to look at the bigger picture of my business in such a deep and lengthy kind of a way. And then really explore, what am I doing on certain channels and what does it even mean and what impact does it have? And what, when I'm increasingly investing my time and energy in doing this, but it lasts like less than 24 hours, what's the payoff of that? Why are we here? Why? It's so distracting. It's really important that we're not just impulsive and just stop doing things immediately, but by prioritizing and simplifying down to only what is essential and important, and then refining your focus, I can honestly report back and say the only difference that it has made to my business and my bottom line is that it's more profitable and I feel calmer and the connections I make are genuine and deeper, and it's easier to sell things because I don't have to. People are finding me. And the content that I'm sharing, when I do share it, it just feels more fun to create because it's not done with this hamster wheel kind of pressure. It's like an honest just expression of something I want to say in the moment. I soon discovered that I was getting things done faster because I was showing up for the task and just committing to the task, but not worrying about how long the task was supposed to take, and enjoying doing it so much that it just got done. Like I was excited to get up and do it rather than feeling like it was something that I have to do today. Now, I have 3 tips for making this an easier thing to do, like loosening hard deadlines. So I'm just going to quickly share those with you now because this is a pretty big one. The first tip is to create intentional productivity routines and spaces for yourself to be productive. So I know that I know when and where I'm going to be working on something. And for me, I like that to be in my office with certain music playing, sometimes with the blinds down, on one of my windows so it's easier to focus on my screen, and also setting a 25-minute timer with 5-minute breaks so I can get up and stretch. Now, there's no pressure in this. This is just like a really nice little rhythm that I sit down and do, so it helps me feel like I can focus in an undistracted sort of a way. And when you have a fail-safe way to get started on your work, it's easier to sit down and commit to the process. Like I'm not starting the 25-minute timer and getting straight into things. I just know that all I need to do is sit down for 25 minutes and get started, and eventually the flow will kind of come, which is really nice. So that's the first tip. Just create an intentional little productivity routine or a ritual, and maybe even a space for you to feel like you can easily dive in. The second tip is to commit to showing up to the task and not commit to how long the task is meant to take. So rather than applying Parkinson's law, where you're saying, I'm just going to get this done in an hour, you're just committing to showing up to the task and letting it take however long it takes. Now, I want you to know that a very sort of Australian, a very American way of doing things is to really abide by these laws. But if you look to different cultures, like the French culture, for example, Italian culture, the slow living culture, there is no, this is how long it's meant to take unless you're kind of baking. It's just things take as long as they take, and there is natural timing kind of implemented. So this isn't just like a wild woo-woo left of field thing that I made up and you can start thinking about. This is actually this is woven into the tapestry of cultures all around the world, and we're just implementing it into business in possibly a culture where it's not so common. So showing up to the task and not committing to how long it's meant to take is something that is already happening in so many places around the world, right? So once you have your methods for getting into like doing your work, it's just then about getting into it and doing it until it's done. Now, that might mean for you that it only takes one session of writing, but it also might mean that once you get into it, it means coming back over a few days or even a few weeks until it's done, and not so much worrying about, oh, that's taking much longer than it's supposed to. So that's what that means. Just commit to showing up to the task and not how long the task is meant to take. The next tip, so the third tip, is to just take as much off your plate as the business owner as you possibly can, so that your deep work can be focused on the things that you do best, that only you can do, and that you have the space and time to then work on them, and you're not getting bogged down by tasks that you don't need to be doing. Now, this means handing things to a team member that you don't need to be doing. And also, if you have more than one team member, handing the right tasks to the right team members, so you're not just then clogging up the task list of somebody else. So by taking as much off your plate as you can, you free up the space to let things take a little longer if they need to, and be a little better in quality. Just like slow food takes a little longer to prepare, but you really get to enjoy it. So that's the first example, is loosening up deadlines. And it's probably more of an overarching example. The rest are a little more specific. So let's get into the rest. So example number 2 is I brought this podcast in-house, the production in-house, so that I didn't have to create to the timeline of a production schedule, which I'm loving. And HSPs, highly sensitive people, this one is huge for us. So it's really, really subtle, but it's a tiny detail that has made a huge difference for me. I can now just create podcast episodes and share them as they're done instead of committing to a schedule. And it means that there's just a lot more time to indulge in thinking and creating, which makes the whole process feel really enjoyable for me. Number 3 is long, slow launches. This one's not necessary in order to bring a praise of slowness, I guess, to your business, but you can certainly do launches in whatever timing feels natural to you. And I love doing fast and lazy launches. I love doing all kinds of different launches, but I certainly do love, in particular for my masterminds, a long, slow launch. I'm currently enrolling for 2 mastermind groups that I host through the next 9 months that start in October. And instead of just having the doors open for a really short period of time, even though I haven't talked about it much, I've had the doors open for about 6 weeks now. And as people enroll, I'm just getting to know each of them and coaching everyone in this bonus program before the official one kicks off. And it's so nice. So there's more about those masterminds in the show notes if you'd like to consider them. But what I love most about this is that there has been time to really get to know everyone, and the pressure has been well and truly off me being everywhere all at once. And my clients also really benefit from having the extra time with me and each other to get to know each other, to start working on some of the things that they thought were going to be the main goal of the mastermind, and they've already kind of started kicking those goals. And we get to have really fun conversations. But there's also a lot more time for people who are thinking about it to kind of ask questions and find out more, which just feels really nice as well, not pressured. Number 4 is working to my own circadian rhythm and on days and times that work for my physical capabilities. So this one I started years ago, and I've spoken about before. I'm not a super early morning person or a super late night person, except occasionally when I am. So that's the way that I work. I also know that if I don't have some space in my calendar regularly for things to be moved around if they need to be, I feel more stressed. So even if I don't need to use that space for anything but more creative work or rest, I still need it there. Now, after having chronic illness, I know that having a week with no calls once a month means that if I do have a tough few weeks, there's always 1 week where I can recover if I need to, or I can use that time to kind of get ahead on other projects. Now, I have to tell you To those of us who started working in a 9 to 5 and where people were available at the drop of a hat during business hours, 5 days a week, every week of the year, this sounds really annoying, but believe me, it's not. Slow living is about letting everyone off the hook, including yourself. It's about trusting that by you getting back to people in natural timing, it will be the perfect timing for them. It's about knowing that the best times for you to work mean that you can properly be on and at your best when you do show up for work and your clients. It means you have natural, boundless energy to do your work when you do show up. And it means that people can choose to work with you based on when you're available or not if that doesn't suit them. It's okay for your availability to be a reason why you do or don't end up working with someone. So being based in Australia with a global business, people might have the assumption that you would need to be on all the time because if you have a global audience, they're going to be awake when Australians are asleep. But that's not what I pretend to be, so people don't expect it from me. We've never been the type of company who has prided ourselves on getting back to people within 2 minutes. But when we do get back to people, it is quality and it's genuine and it's helpful and it's resourceful. Rather than hosting my calls at a really early hour of the day in Australian time when it works for most of the rest of the world, I host multiple calls for my clients at better times of the day that suit me, but also that suit international time. So for example, rather than like a call at 8 a.m., which I don't mind occasionally, I will host kind of more regular calls like later, say 11 and then 7 p.m. or something like that, which means more people have more time choices to choose from, but also I get to show up when I naturally have more energy and everyone wins when they don't get a tired Haley who can't remember what day it is. So working to your own circadian rhythm wherever you can means that at the time you're showing up to get things done, the lack of energy is not the reason you wouldn't get it done. It means that you have boundless energy, you're present, you're on. It's so much easier to be consistent when you're doing this. Now, if you have a job or a business with specific work hours and you think, well, that doesn't apply to me, just remember it's okay to get creative. It might not be perfect, but you can see if you can just set some different hours for yourself, maybe set some different hours for when you do your creative work that doesn't require your business to be open. I don't know, test it and see what happens. Remember, just because most people do a certain thing doesn't mean that it actually works. Number 5 is no longer borrowing any energy from the future. I read somewhere that when you drink coffee, which I happen to really like, you're borrowing energy from the future and you need to repay it at some point. Now that might be a little bit extreme and this girl is not going to be giving up her morning coffee just yet, but I do know really well within myself that there's drinking coffee for enjoyment and there's drinking coffee because you need to get through something. And no amount of caffeine can replace rest. Nothing can replace rest, actually. So this is a really simple way that I try to remember to apply slow living to my business that has a really big impact on my natural energy levels. I have a long history with inconsistent energy. And so sometimes it's so tempting to just have another coffee, especially if it's cold and rainy or if my husband is having his afternoon coffee, which doesn't seem to affect him at all. But I know that instead of having that, if I just lie down for a moment, which I can do working from home where there's a bed, or if I just do a bit of meditation instead, I feel like after that I've had proper rest and I have so much more natural, consistent energy. And it's better for me long term because the caffeine just builds up in my system and I end up not being able to sleep very well. But this one is super hard for me. Like the temptation is always there to just push through. It's what I'm great at. It's a really good skill that I have to just push through. But that pushing through really snowballs. And once I'm in that mode, I find it much harder and harder to slow down and stop. I don't know if you can relate to this, but that's certainly my Achilles heel. So taking the time to just pause and take a break instead of consuming something that's going to give me energy, it pays so many dividends and it reinforces that it's safe to trust my natural energy and pace, that it's okay to take a break. And the amount of energy and time that I have is perfectly enough and it's all that I need. And that's a really nice thought. Number 6 is nurturing relationships and letting them unfold at their own pace. Okay, so in the world of coaching, connection has become a bit of a commercial strategy and it was never meant to be that. Yet as a coach, it's true. I work with humans. Humans are everywhere, literally. And that's the beautiful thing about having a business that works with people. You just never know where your next potential client or customer is going to come from, or where the relationships that you develop will go with the people that you meet. Now, this is not something that I've ever actually had to change about myself, but I do have this conversation really frequently with people who are feeling burned out or bored with their work about the beauty in genuine connection and letting it just be that without it being some kind of covert strategy for creating business. Now, it might sound a little bit strange that we would even need to have this conversation, but it's no different to how when people are using social media, all of a sudden they start taking photos instead of just taking a photo, but they're taking a photo because they think about how good that photo would look on Instagram, or how that's something that they've just thought or said would make a really good piece of content. It's just a natural evolution of being in business to know that relationships can really turn into business opportunities, and that's a tightrope to walk. A slow living business way of thinking about relationships is to just let them be whatever they are. And if someone is meant to work with you, or if you are meant to work with someone, or a connection is going to be made, or this is going to go somewhere, it will happen without you having to force it. And in fact, it's more likely to happen without you forcing it. But we should never even have that in mind when connecting, because again, if you're not forcing it so that hopefully it turns into something, once again, that takes us back to this exchange zero-sum mindset where we do things so that we get something back. It truly is about natural unfolding and genuine connection. And people can feel it when it's not. I've met the most incredible humans that have become friends, and some have become clients in the most unexpected and unsuspecting of places, in the most unlikely of circumstances, simply because the focus was not on getting anything whatsoever. It was just on connecting and having fun, and that's it. And even when I am in a business conversation with someone and they want to get started with me, I don't rush to make a sale with a potential client. I'm not into always be closing. I'm into always be connecting. Let it become what it needs to become in its own time. I don't even propose coaching or propose a coaching package with a potential client until I know what exactly we're going to be working on. And sometimes I even let them know I don't think that they need coaching when I feel that way. And the irony is, not rushing people makes them so much more clear when they are ready, which makes everything easier. So natural timing means powerful relationships. It means clear intentions, clear boundaries, clear expectations. It's a really nice way to have nice, clean business. Now, the final way that I implement natural timing into my business is this one's going to sound funny, but it's making data-backed decisions. So often when I'm playing with something new or just testing something out in my business, I get a little hunch about it. And I'm sure you know what I mean. You have an idea about something and you want to give it a go. It's exciting you. Maybe other people are doing it. Remember, it's not always right for you, and it doesn't always work just because everyone else is doing it. But rather than just kind of jumping straight in, it requires making data-backed decisions, requires taking a mindful moment to have a think about how you might be able to either gather some information about the results or gather data yourself to be able to assess after a period of time, or even before starting, whether it's actually worth doing and whether it's worth continuing. So what a lot of folks do is they see the next new thing and everyone's doing it and they jump on board and they do it too, and they don't really think about the impact that it has. And I like to think about it like this. Every single moment that you spend in your business doing a task is time and energy and money that could potentially be used doing something way more fun or way more helpful. So even though the task might be fun itself, if it's not getting you closer to where you want to be, it's cluttering up what is working. It's blocking the flow. It's noise. So before diving into doing something, it's really good to just check and see the data to see what works. Now, there are two ways that I recommend doing this, and they depend on the types of decisions that you need to make. The first is with raw data and analysis. And the second is from personal reviews and debriefs. Let's start with raw data and analytics. These reveal to us what is really working from like a numbers perspective. And I like to back up my little intuitive nudges by tracking the data and seeing for myself. So making data-backed decisions means you're not just guessing and you're not blindly just trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. So I'll give you a couple of examples. A particular form of exercise, let's say, or a way of eating that you hope will make you feel more flexible or help with stress or metabolism or energy. Without tracking the data, like your measurements or your weight or your heart rate or your temperature, or your cycle, or your sleep, or how you're feeling mentally and emotionally, without tracking this, you have to just guess if it's working. And studies have actually shown that by trying to ballpark it and remember the data ourselves, we can be wrong by up to 80% off the mark. Now, another example is something that we're trying in my business right at the moment, and it's a software called ManyChat. So you know how on Instagram people say, message me the number 79 and I'll send you blah, blah. Well, we're testing it out right now to see if more people access our website by using that strategy. And then if they're actually the type of humans who we want interacting with the website, which sounds a little bit funny. So we started out by, I put out a call on Instagram and I said, what do you think about this? And I had a lot of people come back and say, it works, it's good, or I really can't stand it. And we paid attention to the sort of market research that we did on what people had to say, both people who are using it and people who have responded to messages like that. But I have this theory that if I make things a little bit less, maybe easy to access or less automated up front, to be able to access my website and everything on it, the kind of people who do eventually land on my website are the kind of people who are already searching for what's there, or they're motivated enough to be the kind of people who don't need me to kind of hand them things. They're like really self-led sort of people. Now that's my theory. I've got a few reasons for this theory, but I wanted to back this up by seeing what happens by looking at the data. So this message me ManyChat kind of thing, it's so easy for someone to just comment and then I send them a podcast, which is really, really nice. But over time, we'll be able, because that takes time to do. Every single thing we set up, it takes a certain amount of time. Someone's got to do it. We've got to write what happens. Like, it's not just a magical thing that takes no time. And all these little things add up. Now, over time, we'll be able to see how many actual clients or customers, like people who love our work and want to be involved with it and want to actually do it, how many of those people have actually come from one of these automations. And this is going to be a long-term thing, but analyzing where people have originally found the link to my website, we can look at the behavior of people on my site. And it's not that everyone needs to become a customer or a client, but it is about looking at, is this genuinely improving the metrics of our business? So say if there are more people visiting the website and we're not making any more sales, but there's just heaps more people visiting it, I know that there might be more traffic coming to the site, but they might not be ideal clients. Or I know that there might be something that needs to change on the website. Like, it gives me data that I can make decisions with. So I'm not just blindly kind of following what everyone's doing. I know for sure that this is true with selling. Like, I have years of data to back this one up. People will always say things like the fortune is in the follow-up. You have to follow up with people. Like, it's in selling everywhere. And I don't do this anymore because I know that if I have to sort of chase someone up front or keep following them up, I'm going to have to keep doing that when they're a client and they're probably not that keen to get started on my work in their own natural timing. And that's not the kind of experience I want to give someone. And it's not actually the kind of client that I want to work with. So I don't do that. Technically, I'm leaving money on the table, but I'm not actually really interested in being paid if someone is not really that interested or motivated and ready to start working together. So to me, it makes sense not to do it. Now, over the years, we've actually asked people how they found me at times. And most people who have become clients at the very top tier of my work, so they've come through a course, they've done multiple courses, they've done masterminds, they've become one-on-one clients. They've said that they either found my podcast or YouTube or someone shared me with them. Like, it was a little bit random, but then they poured over everything on my site and that's how they got to know me and they knew that they were ready to work with me. It wasn't because of like a webinar, traditional marketing ways of doing things. And this is amazing information to have because it tells me that the content that we create is working. And that doesn't mean we won't test out new things like webinars. It just means that when we're deciding over time what to keep, what to invest time in, and what can go, we know that all the time and energy and expense that goes into creating a webinar doesn't yield the kind of results at this point that just creating content and connecting with people does. And that time might be better put somewhere else to improve the quality of what does work. So every decision to add a task to mine or another team member's workload in my business, it requires time and money and energy, and it's smart business to be regularly checking in to make sure that the actions that you're taking, they actually have an impact and they really work, especially in this time of social media and lots of noise about what everyone's doing or what you're supposed to be doing, where it really just feels like you're feeding a machine if you don't pay attention to what's working. I'm not interested in feeding a machine. I'm interested in feeding my soul by doing more of what works, more of what I love, and less of what makes no difference and just adds to the noise. So that's raw data, making data-backed decisions with raw data. The second way is to just use data from your own personal reviews. So with all my clients, I recommend regularly checking in and reviewing the week that was. What worked? What didn't? What you'd like to change? What you're proud of? What your focus is for the upcoming week? I tend to do this weekly, and when I do, I can look back and see that sometimes there are things in my review that come up repeatedly, and that's a signal to kind of pay attention to those things. And you can ask what you learned or what was your biggest insight. And this is such an efficient way to learn, because by extracting and assimilating what you have learned from the time that has gone by and giving your mind the space to process it, you tend to make more quality, healthier decisions in the future, and you do it faster. So regularly checking in and reviewing or debriefing, though it does add, say, another half an hour to your day or week, it means you're really juicing your time for the best bits so that you can repeat them. You can let go of what's not working from a place of hindsight and perspective, not stress or overwhelm, and you can do more of what does work, and then you can improve the quality of what does work as well. So you can take the data from the past to make decisions from the future. So those are 7 examples of how I implement this into my own business. So let's recap, right? We have 7 ways that you can implement natural timing. The first is respecting natural cycles. The second was mindful decision making, pacing workloads, sustainable growth, focusing on client, business, and market alignment, embracing presence and trust, and work-life balance. And the 7 ways that I implement it in my own business are: number 1, loosening hard deadlines on creative projects by committing to showing up to the task, not how long it takes, taking as much of my plate off that I can, and creating intentional productivity rituals and spaces. Number 2 was I brought my podcast in-house. Number 3, long, slow launches. Number 4, working to a circadian rhythm and on days and times that work for your physical capabilities. Number 5, no longer borrowing energy from the future and trusting your natural pace. Number 6, nurturing relationships and letting them unfold at their own pace and in their own way. And number 7, making data-backed decisions. So there you have it. Now remember, slow living in business does not mean going slow. It simply means going at the right pace, your natural pace. And it pays dividends in so many ways beyond just profit and productivity. But I tell you, profit and productivity, that's a pretty good benefit for business. So I would love to know, you can comment underneath this episode if you're listening to it on my website. Are you interested in giving slow living for business a go? Do you implement any of these already? Where would you love to implement some natural timing in your business? What challenges do you think it might arise, and how can you get creative? I would really just love to hear from you and continue the conversation below. And of course, if you'd love to continue the conversation about working with me in some way regarding this, either in your business or on a project that you have or on a goal that you have where you want to go from good to great, we can apply slow living principles to anything. So there are a few ways that we can do that together. Number one, you can download the business housekeeping checklist. These are all underneath the episode. Number two, you can download the Good to Great guide, which is a free course I've created on playing bigger and feeling better. And number three, you might also love my masterminds, which are currently slowly enrolling right now, the Bloom Business Incubator and the Fierce Salon. And I'll leave all the links for those below. So thanks for tuning in, my friends, to this mammoth episode. All the notes are on my website, and I encourage you to kind of download them and have a think about what you're learning, maybe journal about it and see what you can implement from this experience, from this time that you've just spent listening to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, everything you want is so much closer than you think. So stay curious, stay open, and I'll see you in the